So I was looking through my list of people that I thought were really cool, and I came across your name, and I was like, let me think about Will. And I've been kind of in this coaching space for about a year now, and I've been just kind of reaching out to people who are, either they're practice owners, they used to be practice owners. I've been networking with like people like D Bills, who's kind of a practice owner, also has the kind of the guru thing on the side.
Yeah, right.
You've been a practice owner. You've also been a part of a big merger and then a sale. You were a partner, and now you've got a billing company and you're doing all kinds of cool stuff. So I thought it would be cool to just talk a little bit about that journey a little bit, and just
Yeah.
specifically some of the lessons that you've learned along the way. And I was really curious to hear like if you can see like some of the same types of patterns in the PT space, like the private practice owner space. Do you see some of the same type of things like on the billing side and
Mm-hmm.
in the healthcare
Oh, HBA, the Healthcare Business
Business
Academy.
Academy? Yep, yep,
Mm-hmm.
yep, yeah. So tell me more about that. Let's start there. Tell me a little about your journey and some of the lessons that you've learned along the way.
Yeah, you said a lot of really cool things I want to highlight. Number one, that there are different stages. Our common coach and great friend Scott Fritz says it's not the age of the individual, but the stage of the business. And so it doesn't matter our age. What matters is the stage of business. And so the PT journey, very easy, can look like, if we're not aware, becoming a new grad, a tenured PT who knows what they're doing, a director, an owner exiting, starting businesses that are industry facing, usually starting in the consultation space or coaching space. And then after that, I mean, that's just one potential journey. I have friends, and you probably do too, who have just stayed in that PT owner space. And we have common people in our network, like Blaine Steinmeck, I think he's on his like 60th location or whatever.
Mhm.
So they stay in that space and they expand and they become eventually this like multi-state, business. But it's interesting you mentioned, because there are unique lessons to each stage from my experience. And there are some commonalities that you see all the way into seeing it again as someone who goes a more business to business or B2B, where I work with PT owners now, and seeing some of these lessons manifest, not just for them, but for me in a different light. So the stage of business is interesting. And as we progress through, it's a journey that I don't even think we're aware of is there. We really do have more than that as an option, but most PT owners maybe not even realize that that's an option, to
Mhm.
go that route, to learn, earn, and return, which is, I love that phrase, right? Like we learn, we earn, we return. And that's basically the same thing as mentioning those stages of the business. So yeah, I'm happy to talk about that journey in any way you'd like.
Yeah, I like the idea that you mentioned stages of business. I We built our coaching program specifically around helping owners get clear on what stage of business they're on. So we
Hmm.
built a little mini window of that to help people understand that. But I'm curious, like how do you can you talk a little bit about those stages? Like how do you define those stages? What type of uh information do you use to define those stages of business?
Yes. So what we've created in my world is something called the leadership hierarchy. And there's five key stages. And that first stage on the entrepreneurial leadership hierarchy is the physical therapist who comes in and starts to just hustle. Like they're in that world of learning their skill set. That's
Stage
all they
one.
ever. What's that?
Stage one.
Stage one. I've got a graph and everything if you want me to pull it up. I don't know if it's relative for what we're doing, but it's interesting because, and by the way, that graph was adapted from other graphs outside of PT
Sure.
that are similar in nature. But the physical therapy stage there is just like trying to get over themselves. They don't think that they have the skills that they have. They're trying to overcome that feeling of they're not as good as the degree says they are, but they learn their skills and they think that's all they're ever going to want to be. And then the next level comes in, which is the director stage. And that director stage is where they start taking on actual leadership concepts. Now, given every step in this hierarchy is leadership, but what's the number one job of any leader? To create more leaders. And so this is the first step into that domain. When you're a director, we start looking at it from a place of building other people. Now, in our industry, because there's such little support, oftentimes what happens is the directors become a default dump. All the stuff that the owner's doing that they just can't keep up with, they end up giving to their director. It's like, here, and there's such a difference between here, just take this from me versus what you were talking about with Nathan, which is giving plenty of space for people to grow, scale, and figure out their own problems.
Mm-hmm.
And then from that second stage of directorship, then we get into the first stage of the higher pyramid, which is that ownership level. That's when we go from being self-employed. The first stage is self-employment. We go open a practice and we own our job. And we think that's all we want. Here's the commonality, Adam, in all these stages. We think that's all we want.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a
Mm-hmm.
PT and I'm treating. All I want to do is treat my patients.
Mm-hmm.
Then you become a director. It's like, no, I want to help my clinic go right, but that's all I want. I want to treat my patients and be a part of a great team. Then we become entrepreneurs. All I want is to own my job. I want to make more than 80,000 a year. My dream is to make 150, see the same number of patients and have a small team work with me. But the problem is that there's gaps between all these things. And it's in solving those gaps that we rise to the next level. And then once we get to that next level above that self-employment stage, then we become a manager. And I don't like the word manager, but that describes that stage because we stop begging for new patients. We're starting to actually get some flow in on their own. We're not chasing profits. We're starting to get them a little bit more consistently. And instead of like being self-employed, we start looking at hiring directors underneath us and learning that stage. And then we get to that stage of like true leadership where we are effortless it's not that we don't have problems, but we have a real team underneath us. We have leaders upon leaders who are growing things for us. And that stage, the gap between those top two stages often exists simply because people are pretty comfortable when they have a director and they have a couple of locations. And so it becomes that comment from the book, Good to Great, that good is the enemy of great. Because we're comfortable at that stage, but true greatness comes from building systems and peoples at a level to where the owner can leave for a month every year and nothing goes wrong. If anything, it keeps getting better.
Mm-hmm.
So as you guys are coaching people up that hierarchy of leadership, we do things similarly in my world in different ways. And it's something that I wish PT owners were aware of. For my journey, it was painful because I didn't have as much support as I think, like, for example, you and Nathan are able to offer now.
Dude, that's awesome. I learned a lot just from hearing you talk about that. So like the main thing the thing that really hit me was one lesson that you learned was we think that's all we want.
Yeah.
Right. And I think it also ties in a little bit to good is the enemy of great, because they're both kind of the same thing. Like you think that this is what you want. And then when you get there, it's like, okay, I'm done.
Yeah.
Right. I'm done. And it takes this new mindset push, this new mindset ceiling for you to break through, to realize there's actually a bigger vision for yourself. You just haven't quite explored it yet. So that's amazing. I like the stages of business too. And I experienced a lot of that as a business owner. You know, we talk about stage one a lot, and stage one is that hustle phase where you're hustling up new patients. It's like, get referrals in the door. Get referrals in the door. We call it the get busy stage. Get busy, right? Stage two is like, congratulations, you're busy. Get organized. Policy, procedure, systems. You might have a team of 3 to 4 at that point, right? Then stage 3 is like, now that you're organized, you get to build your team, right? So it's like leadership, recruiting, clinical director, right? And then stage 4 is like, now we get to scale. Now we get to open up a billing company, start a coaching company, open up another location, right? That's kind of how we define it. And it's really, really cool being like having gone through those stages. And I still am learning a ton on the business, like the clinic ownership side.
Sure.
But I'm starting all over on the business coaching side. I'm starting all over, and I get to like relive all of that. And it's really cool going through that experience again and not feeling that sense of overwhelm, and really kind of understanding like, hey, I'm just in stage 1, or hey, I'm just in stage 2, right? So did you feel that, have that same experience when you started in the black?
Absolutely. So every single time I started something new, I went in there with a false sense of confidence every time. And it wasn't like, in the end, it wasn't totally false, but like, I'm one of those where I was like, oh, if I could figure out how to run 4 locations and have them be almost autonomous, I can start a billing company with the right partner like Katie Archibald.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we started it, I had all sorts of like very restful evenings because I'm like, no, this is great. I'm pouring in hundreds of thousands of dollars to get it started of my own money. And then, and then you start going up those hierarchies again. And man, what I love about the hierarchies, Adam, is that nothing's more humbling than starting over in a new hierarchy vein. The difference being when you've gone through one to a point where you've been able to experience leadership. And let's be really clear, people who get to that level 5 leadership, they are not better people. Level 5 actually is a term from Jim Collins about from good to
Mm-hmm.
great, about that
Mm-hmm.
special type of leader. That person is always more of a reflection of the coaching that they've received and the team that they were able to build, which is mostly due to them, but not exclusively by any means. And so when we start over and we don't have the team and we need a different coach, and that's the thing I've always had. I always have a coach. They're always in the industry I want to work when I'm building in the industry, but later on I actually diversify outside the industry. And so, yeah, it was so humbling starting in the black, man. I remember one day in particular, Katie and I were talking about, we'd been in business for a year. And I was like, what should our first quarter theme for next year be? Right. And she's like, how about we turn a profit? I'm like, yeah, how about our company's name is in the black, which is a financial term for being profitable. And I was like, how about our theme is in the black is in the black. And our team laughed when they said that. And we were actually on track for what we wanted to hit numerically, but there is nothing more humbling than watching your bank account just drop
Mm-hmm.
and having people you're hiring and to mishire and be like, crap, I brought that person on and they were not a good fit. And you have to fire them and all the head trash that goes with that. And the sleepless nights start kicking back in. But I'd still rather do that than get stuck. It's like, you know what I mean? I love the idea that our potential is unlimited. I don't think we realize as leaders our potential and our power. And I think the older I get, that's probably one thing I am learning is that like it's unlimited, you
It's
know?
unlimited, dude. Love that. Yeah, one of the things is, one of the things that I'm really, really committed to is seeing and hearing you so that you can learn to see and hear yourself and like realize the potential that you really do have. Like people are really like in our industry, people are starving for new patients and they're looking to outsource. Like, I just need I need more referrals, or I just need, this amazing billing company, or I just need this amazing solution to automate my practice. And it's like, no, like you are the answer to everything you want. You know what I mean? And like helping people realize that. And once they start to see that and they start to develop that vision, that's when it becomes really, really fun.
I agree that traction of them believing. One thing that's interesting to note about you though, is I never felt like you needed help with that particular area. And I've always wanted to ask you, who was it? Was it organic for you to already have that like knowledge? Not that you were anything other than humble, but there was this kind of like awareness of like, you know what, I can do these things. And that's part of the reason I thought you were so advanced when we met. But was there someone in your previous world that like showed that to you, or is that something that you just developed by learning? And if so, how did you do it?
Man, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I'm not a super talented person. Like I'm just a normal guy. I think that the thing that drives me is mostly internal, and I have this fear of regret. I have this fear of like the thing that I just don't want is to be on my deathbed and have to look at my son and be like, I didn't take the shot, you know, I didn't go
Mm.
for it, like, and I'd like for whatever reason, I can't live with that. So like I always find myself putting myself I put myself in really uncomfortable situations to where it's either sink or swim, and I'm a
Mm.
fighter. So like so I may give the impression that I've got it figured out or something, but I don't, man. I'm swinging for the fences just like everybody else is.
Yeah, I think you said it though. You said the thing I was looking for, which is like you have this inherent clarity of like potential negative outcome that you don't want to have. And I think that's the only healthy type of fear there is the fear of not banking enough on ourselves or taking our shot. That we oftentimes in physical therapy, we're so afraid to hire the coach. We're so afraid to do the thing that's going to put us in deep water because we're already drowning.
Right.
But oftentimes that's the only way through is through. And it's only in swimming forward in that way and taking those risks. I've actually never hired a coach I regret ever, because
Even
everyone
the
of us
bad
taught me something.
ones.
Yeah.
Even the bad ones. I feel the exact same way. I get on these calls with people who call and these practice owners who are amazing, they're super smart. And they're like, we talk a little bit about what it's like to work together, and we get to the end and we talk about the price, you know. And just to be transparent, like, we are not the most expensive place. We're right there in the middle. But, if I ask the question, like, money aside, like, is this something you really want? They always say yes. Yeah, of course. Like, I would love to do this. So really, it's not a decision on, do you want this? It's really a decision like, do you feel like you can pull it off? Like, that's what we have to help people overcome. Like,
Yeah.
you're betting on yourself.
I
You know what
think
I
it's
mean?
coming from a fear of like, I'm going to spend. So the first time Nathan and I spent money on a coach, it was $30,000. It was a
Mhm.
full like program that incorporated years. So it wasn't like, you know, but it was 30 grand.
Wasn't a 6 month gig.
It wasn't a 6 month gig. It was a full series of programs and stuff that we were committed to. And by the way, we had social proof. We knew people and had talked to people who'd been through that program. They were who we wanted to be. And we were still like, oh my gosh, are we going to do this? And I'll remember Nathan just sitting across from me going, yeah, what else are we going to do?
You got to
And
get there.
I think we're afraid of spending that money. Now, that was a lot of money, of course, but it's not like we were going to go bankrupt by spending that money. And I've known people who've gotten loans to pay for coaches because they understand what I didn't back then, which is that this is the investment we make in ourselves is the single quintessential expression of self-belief.
Mhm.
And it's risky. What if I have a bad coach? We'll do more research, but once you talk to people who are like
Yeah.
amazed and like having great results, it's like, okay, then your choice is really simple. Do you want to be stuck? Because now we're leaving all the millions of dollars of what could be made, all the freedom we could have, all the trips and the months off, and all the things I've been fortunate enough to experience. I didn't know I was leaving that. I didn't realize at the time that was the decision. All that I could be screwing up by not doing it. And I think that to me has always been like the biggest challenge. And you might think, oh, he's always had it down. But if I can share a quick story, Adam, as you talk
Absolutely.
about my early stages, the first coach I ever hired, this was before Nathan. So this was Nathan and I's $30,000 thing. This was actually 3 or 4 years into us like being together. And at one point, I purchased my location from Nathan. So I was a sole proprietor. I had 2 locations. I was drowning and I was about to walk away. And I was going to walk away from the business completely. This is in 2007. So my wife beautifully was like, hey, I got your back. She's my ride or die. Heather goes, I will completely let you just like, I'll support you in any way. I won't give you any resistance, but before you give up, why don't you go join this networking group called Entrepreneurs Organization? And I was like, sure. And I looked at it and it was $2,500, which I was like, that's insane for a monthly coaching call in a group. It wasn't one-on-one coaching, but they have these quarterly events that they kick it off. And the quarterly events, you're there for 8 hours. And I'm like, how am I going to take 8 hours of a work week and go sit in a room and learn about business while all those patient visits aren't getting seen? All
Mhm.
those employees who are hanging by a thread because I'm keeping them together, what's going to happen? And so I didn't go for the year. I didn't go. The second year, I coped. And then the second year, I was like, okay, that's it. I'm walking away. She goes, actually show up this time and then quit. So at the end of 2008, Will, after you've done a year of this accelerator group and an entrepreneurs organization, you can leave and know that you've tried everything you can. And so I showed up for the first day, and this guy, Scott Fritz, who I mentioned earlier, he's hosting the event, and he goes, hey guys, who are you? And he's talking to me, and I'm like, oh, my name's Will. I was signed up last year, but I didn't come. And he goes, hey, everybody, look at this guy. He was so busy that he didn't have time to get help. And everyone just started laughing, but it didn't make me feel bad. It really didn't. It was kind of like a real, like, hey, you're in the club and I'm razzing you kind of experience. And that changed everything, Adam. That was when my whole world, I look at that moment, the day that I actually paid and showed up, as when everything shifted for me. And now Scott Fritz, that guy who was the facilitator who had sold his business in 2007 for an unbelievable amount of money, non-physical therapist, he and I are now partners in one of my 4 companies. He's a minority partner, and I get to see him every week. And he's an angel investor in 50 other companies. Like, who would have thought that that physical therapist who was going to walk away from his practice, I am a living testament that if I can do it, literally anyone can. But it really just takes paying the money and showing up and realizing, like you said, if we start over, to be patient and be like, well, what's the worst option? To give up?
Right. Right. So I want to shout out to Heather for being such an amazing leader.
Yeah.
Right. Like there's, we talked about like leadership, like developing other leaders. And I will go a step further. I think the biggest expression of leadership is helping people commit to what they really want.
Mm.
Right. So like Heather helped you realize more what you really wanted and enrolled you to take action towards what you really wanted. Right. Because you said it like you didn't take action because you were focused on what you didn't want. Patients aren't getting seen. This isn't happening. All this negative, negative, negative. It's like we get all this fear junk. And it's like being brave enough to say, that's all a lie, and like focusing and being bold enough to go after what you really want and believing in yourself and taking action. And when you can get alignment like that, it's like I have the same story. Like I worked with Nathan, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was young, dumb. I was like just working my fingers to the bone. And Nathan pulled me out of the gutter, got me out of patient care, actually started making more money, spending more time with my family. And now we're partners. Same exact story. So that's amazing.
It is. It is. And it's always, those people like Heather in my world and your wife that are the ride or dies. And that's where I feel the most blessed, right? Like I think that story without her, totally different direction, totally different, outcome. And that's why I love that phrase. It's the age, not the state. It's the stage, not the age, because not everyone has maybe some of those elements in place. Not everyone has maybe an organic, natural ability to like fear the thing that we should be fearing, which is untapped potential, or a Heather, but we all have something. And I would say anyone listening to your podcast today, anyone listening is in that realm of powerful leader looking to tap into what they can sense is inside. It may be motivated by I'm drowning and I want help. But my experience over the last 5 years, I was telling you before this call, I've had the privilege of working with 93 different PT companies in the last 3 years. And my one commonality I've realized is that you can see people in their late 70s who just never listened to the podcast, who never made any steps. So if you're listening and you're like, yeah, this isn't me. No, man, you are exactly us. We are you, no matter what stage you're in. Because we're again, we might be out of that stage in one setting, but we're back in it in another. And each time it's another reflection of humility and realizing we're nothing without our teams and all that. So I love it.
Love it, man. Yeah, we talk a lot about, I just got a few things that I'm kind of thinking about. The stages of business, they come with avatars. Like each stage has this ownership avatar that lives inside of it, right?
Yeah.
Like they have the overwhelmed guy who's in stage 2 who can't figure out his systems, right? There's the fear, the woman who just opened their practice who's full of fear in stage 1 trying to drum up some referrals, right? There's the frustrated owner in stage 3 who's trying to develop their leadership team and who can't really learn to let go. And right. So like every stage comes with its own discomfort, right? And our ability to kind of learn a little bit more about ourselves and overcome that to experience new possibilities is really what helps us grow.
Agreed.
Question. What is the biggest, I mean, we talked a lot about a lot, but I want to hear more like bullet point, like boom, boom, boom. The biggest 1 to 3 biggest lessons that you've had to learn over your entrepreneur, career.
Yes. Stage 1, like technically stage 3, but like level 1 of self-employment. The biggest lesson is that there are plenty of problems that new patients don't solve. Because the erroneous thought I had was if I'm busier, I'll be successful. If I see more patients, I'll be successful. That is hands down the biggest lesson I learned at that stage, because that mindset is what kept me thinking like I'm a self-employed and not a business owner. Right. And the distinction, just for the clarity of the audience, self-employment is when we exchange our time for money. Being a true owner, a business owner, this is, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but like a true business owner exchanges people and processes for money.
Mhm.
They own a set. So like that mindset of being a PT, that I am a PT, that the more new patients I see, the better it is. That was limiting. The next stage, being an owner who has a director, the next stage that was really clear to me was that no one can ever do it better than me.
The letting go part.
Yeah, because all those cookies and pies at the self-employment stage really validated. And I hired people, and it seemed like my biggest seeming frustration was, why can't I find people who are as good as I am?
Yeah. These people just won't listen.
They don't care enough. They're selfish. All these
Oh
judgments that aren't
man.
true, which well, actually aren't necessarily false, but they're not the whole truth, at least.
That's why leadership is the key to that stage.
Totally.
Like you've got to learn leadership and recruiting. I feel like recruiting in that stage is hard too. Because
Oh, yeah.
recruiting is leadership, right? It's like
You've heard me say it. Recruiting is,
right,
in my mind, the quintessential expression of leadership, because
right,
it's if a leader's number one job is to create more leaders, recruiting is basically that. It's just a
right.
matter of finding, developing, and retaining talent. So yeah, man, like that second level of just being like, no one is as good as me. Because then I remember that shift in my mind of being like, okay, I'm not the practice, but I'm still pretty much the best one here.
I'm
And
the guy. I'm the big
no one knows
deal.
how to treat other directors. Yeah. It was like that self-involvement that was not healthy.
Mhm.
And then, the biggest lesson I've learned at the top of that leadership hierarchy, back when I had, Nathan's in Alaska, he's expanding a new concept for us. I have for us 4 locations, and we have a leadership team running it. I'm not treating patients. I'm not even managing directors. All I'm doing is 10 to 15 hours a week of recruiting, which is my energy bucket filler, and overseeing the leadership team. Like I would be with them in their executive council. The thing that I learned at that level, the number one lesson, is how profitability unlocks possibility. How opposite we're taught in school, how like you should never want profits. You should be humble in them. I say this all the time. I want every physical therapist to say that they want to make as much money as possible.
I want to be
Which
rich. I want to be filthy
I want
rich.
physical therapists to say, I want to be rich.
Yeah.
Not
That feels
unethically.
good.
Yeah, dude. Because why? Because it's like what the guy who owns Facebook, what's his name?
Zuckerberg.
Zuckerberg. What Zuckerberg says, don't love him personally, but like he has a couple of really cool quotes. One of them is, we don't do Facebook to make money. We make money to do Facebook.
Mm.
When we get to that level of leadership, we understand the relationship between quality care, changing the industry, impacting patients, and being profitable. It's not one in lieu of the other. It's one causes the other. And when we can facilitate an expansion of those points through developing better people and recruiting, providing better quality care, the money starts to pour in, which allows us to find better people and incentivize them to provide even better quality of care, which pours in more money. And then freedom starts to lead. Like the freedom that I was able to experience was unreal. And so much so that the anxious person that I am, not anxious, like worried, but like, I've got to be busy. That's when it was like, yeah, maybe we should sell our company now. I feel like I've won the game. Let's
I've done
go
it.
start a new game. And there
Mhm.
were plenty of times I regretted it. But now I'm so grateful I did. So
Yeah.
grateful, right? So
Yeah.
those are the main lessons, I would say, bullet points. I just gave you one per stage, but there's many. There's
Yeah.
operational lessons, leadership lessons, though. It's absolutely powerful to see how profitability really does unlock our ability to even imagine what's possible professionally, personally, in every domain of life.
Yeah. I want to just quickly touch on those. We talked about new patients don't solve problems, all problems. All
Right.
problems can't be solved on new. How do you get over that, man? Like, how do you do that? Like, we we get into this because I haven't quite figured this out yet. We get into this stage. This is what me and Nathan were talking about this same thing, but we get into this. We're leaning so heavily on our ability to hustle. Like we know
Mhm.
how to hustle, we know how to build units and get that patient in and get that plan of care going. And that skill set equals success.
Yeah.
Part of that is getting new patients in the door. And we lean on that for years. And then we just kind of we stay on that roller coaster. And we oftentimes get owners who are kind of stuck in that stage of business. And it's like, we have to ask them to like, everything you think, like stop
Mm.
and do this other thing where it's like, seems like a super big waste of time and super boring and you're going to hate it. And I think the only way to get there is through pain. I don't know how else to get through that.
Yeah. Like you said beautifully how you articulated that, Adam, like that concept that we've heard over and over again. Change doesn't happen till the pain of change is lesser than not changing. Like I said that backwards, but it's the same message. Like we have to feel so much pain by not changing the way we think that we eventually are forced to change how we think. So to answer your question, it's different for everybody, but it all boils down to the same concept, which is education. Is understanding. When people can understand what problems aren't solved by having an endless amount of new patients, it does start to shift things. The obvious answers are like staffing. Every PT I've ever met is looking for a PT. And that's why my recruiting company does well, because people are desperate. They'll even talk to someone they've never met. But that's like the tip of the iceberg of what's wrong in thinking that new patients. The biggest thing I've grown in the last 2 years, Adam, is marketing, true marketing, like understanding that world, because we don't really do marketing in physical therapy. We think we do.
Yeah, we got a website and we do SEO. That's about it.
Yeah. Yeah. When we own companies and we go to doctors' offices, that's sales, but we don't use word sales because of all the connotations. But marketing truly is putting a message out to inform and to educate. And so when we are able to understand that we are sending the wrong message when we take any client, see, a therapist who understands this concept that new patients doesn't solve all problems, they're the ones who are dropping United Healthcare. They're the ones who have the courage to like look at their patient mix and say, I'm not going to work with this insurance. The uneducated bleeding heart that we all are, all of us, says, well, I want to help as many people as we can. Okay, here's what we have to see. When we treat someone who has an insurance that undermines the value of our profession, we are hurting future patients with that insurance on a large level. So when we take a stand for the reimbursement that qualifies us to be able to be in business, we are able to help and expand that. Now, that doesn't mean we close our doors. We see it like two options. I take United Healthcare or I don't. And I have to basically worry about my doctors not sending to me. And I have to worry about patients thinking we're all about the money, or my employees thinking we're all about the money. No. We educate people in a third option and say, listen, we're going to, every referral, we'll tell the doctors we don't take them, but we'll tell them why. And we'll have another option for them to go to, Joe Schmo down the street, who's not able to learn these lessons, who's willing to sacrifice his family time and his soul to help someone for $30 an hour. Okay. Like that person, great. We'll have other options for them. There'll always be those other options. So we help, remember, we can help everybody, but we can only serve so many people. So the really savvy business owner who gets over that idea understands that they're going to serve their avatar, their ideal market. And that includes reimbursement. And that's just one factor in addition to like needing to hire more PTs because I'm too busy treating at a loss all these United Healthcare patients. So yeah, it all boils down to education. How we see it depends on how they're willing to be coachable and learn, and how good the coach is. But at the end of the day, all of us needs that to get there. And once we get there, we never go back, right?
So the pain in that stage is you're physically and mentally exhausted and burnout and just overwhelmed and stressed, and you're losing your hair. That's what the pain feels like, right?
Totally.
Okay. So now we're in stage 2 where we're having a hard time letting go.
Yes.
The pain's different there.
Yeah.
For me, the pain was my people started quitting. My people started quitting because I was a micromanager and I was a jerk. I was a poor leader. And like, there's only so many times people can quit until you got to look at yourself and be like, okay, there's no way 7 people are all jerks. You know what I mean? Like you're the only cool guy, right? Like eventually you're going to have to look in the mirror and be like, they're quitting because of you.
Yeah.
You know, has that been your experience?
100%. Dude, I remember telling my wife it was a good day because everyone showed up. Like that was my standard. And when I remember there was this one time, this is the work. See, to me, this next stage is the most personally invalidating, when we're getting out of that level where we are basically director owners, we're still pretty much self-employed, but we're director owners and we have a team and maybe another director underneath us. I remember having a team meeting and then coming back into the office for something and seeing that they were having a staff meeting behind the team meeting to talk about how stupid my information was in the team meeting.
Mm.
I remember crying, like crying all the way home from work that day, because it was like being told by the cool kids, you're an idiot. And I didn't think of my employees as the cool kids necessarily, but that was the feeling of just complete isolation. No one gets me. I'm the biggest loser. Clearly I'm a horrible business owner. And so it comes from releasing that pride of like,
Mm.
I don't care anymore. That was the pain threshold for me. I didn't care at all how much I thought I was good as a therapist. All I cared about was being somewhere at work that was safe. And how do I build that safe environment?
Mm.
And that began my journey into recruiting, like learning how to recruit.
Me too.
That, okay. Because
Me too.
and you're a powerful recruiter. I mean, I remember when we were working together, how like you took some concepts and you just like within weeks did what other people took months to figure out because you were already there. And like, I think that's the pain, is like, I want to build a team that might become a family. And how do I build leaders underneath them? I no longer did a comparison of me versus them. It was, what are their strengths and weaknesses? How can I serve them? And that's how we eventually got to a place where I'll never forget this day, Adam. About a year before I exited, I came in to do a town hall. We had 50 employees, and I walk in and they were like hugging each other and talking and like, oh my gosh, it's so good to see you. And then I walk in and someone goes, oh, hi, Will, how's it going? And then they saw Michelle Bambanek, who at the time was functioning as a CEO. And they're like, Michelle, and Michelle, they hug. And I was like this really welcome team member. They weren't rude to me, but I went from being hated to being seen as this amazing leader to being seen as like, yeah, he's a great guy. He's a part of the company. We're not totally sure what he does because he's not here.
Isn't that crazy?
And that was hard. That was so weird to have all this like need for me and all this like attention, negative or positive, to then go to being like in the background. But from that place, that's where I was able to do some things I never dreamed were possible. It just was no longer about me or the cookies back when I was at PT, right?
That's
so
right.
yeah, it's an interesting journey for sure. Painful, but
That's
very
awesome.
worth it.
That's amazing. So we actually, we're getting into, the mid part of Q1.
Mm.
We've been talking to our clients, in the beginning of January, we talked about annual strategic planning, setting goals,
Yeah.
right? So our clients are killing it. Like they're hitting records, they're smoking it, they're hiring people into their team. Many of them are at this stage of business as of today where they've never been. They've got the most amount of visits or the most amount of people on their team that they've ever been. And they're starting to get like pushback from their team, and they're starting to kind of try to figure out how to like support and challenge.
Sure.
Right. Right. So like, if you don't mind real quick, like how do you, like, what's your spill on like, how do you be that leader that empowers and gives people space, but also has a standard? And like, how do you know when to move and when not to move?
Yeah. So one of my favorite quotes ever is this. Oh, I can't remember who said it. In case you haven't noticed, there's very little original content that I create. I am a big like reflection of everything I've ever learned.
Me
And I
too.
love it because
I steal all that stuff.
yeah, I love it. So this quote was, and I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but like, what a team helps create, a team will support. And so,
Yeah.
so talking about that yearly strategic planning piece, the reason that was so powerful, it took a few years. The first time we implemented things without our team being present, it was very much like, we support you. Yeah, we believe that's a good thing and so on. But the second we started putting people in once a year, now, Adam, this is when things really took off. We started doing quarterly events. So our system became, for the last 2 years of being in business, maybe 3, was that there was an executive council comprising of me, Michelle Bambanek, and 2 others. It was over marketing and some ops. And we would get together on a Thursday, and we'd spend all day Thursday off site at a hotel in a conference room. And we were taking the book, Vern Harnish's book, Scaling Up. And we had read that book. They have a checklist, a literal checklist of what a business needs to have to be elite. researched, again, very proven stuff. And we looked through the checklist and we identified where we were the weakest in that checklist. And we would just spend all day talking about we looked at our stats for the previous quarter, and we'd look at everything that was there. And we'd come up with some general ideas of what we were missing. The next day, so Thursday night, so that's Thursday night, all the directors from the different locations would come in. And so it was about 10 people. We'd have this big kickoff dinner every single time at the same Italian restaurant. All day Friday, we were all together with a facilitator. And that facilitator would help us take what we had taken from Thursday. And then with all the directors, they would piece out the next quarter strategy, which was a direct reflection of the annual thing we did in January. And so this was so great because they were the ones creating, and that whole buy-in thing just went away because they were solving their own problems. I learned that my greatest skill was being authentic as a leader and saying, hey guys, I don't know how to do vacation coverage. I don't. I'm offering 4 weeks, which we did, and none of you can take it because we don't have coverage in the middle of nowhere, Arizona. What do we do? How do we solve that? I got to be honest. I need your help. And then putting them in a space where they could collaborate and create it. And I was totally engaged. It's not like I had my hands off, but I learned that when you have the right people, then they create the right solutions. And so where people are having a hard time buying in, it boils down for each employee, one of three things. Do they know their product? Can they name their product? So it's knowing and naming is the same thing. Do they know how to get it? And do they want it? There's a willingness factor. So if all your employees and leaders are matching those things, that's a check mark yes on those three elements. Then it's a matter of creating space for them to be able, and the technology, we had a facilitator, we had the book, but having space for them to collaborate together to address the big rocks that needed to be moved. And when they moved them, the buy-in was immediate, because when you have 50 employees and you have, not just the executive council, but your own director saying, yeah, this is why we're doing this, guys. And they're talking from a place of complete buy-in. No one ever questions it. And then we'd make a fun theme. So after that Friday, we would make a theme. I remember once it was in the jungle. We played that Guns N' Roses song. Everything was decorated. All the leaders dressed up as different animals, face painted, not dressed up, but face painted as animals. And we were talking about how we're in the jungle. We're coming out of it. We're animals. We can do this. And so we had a quarterly goal, and that goal was attached numerically to a reward if we hit yellow and a super reward if we hit green. And then at the end of that quarterly event, every employee down to the tech wrote one thing that they were going to focus on for that quarter to help move that initiative forward. That was the golden years of my experience professionally in owning a PT practice. Just being a part of that and watching how the culture shifted, how people would eliminate C players on their own. A C player couldn't find a home in our place because they loved the company so much. So that was a long answer to say, given a shared common goal and the ability to get the right people on the bus pointing towards that goal, eliminates all of that other stuff.
Yeah, I agree, man. Dude, super powerful. So biggest lessons. Number one, new patients don't solve all the problems. There's some problems that new patients can't solve, right? Number two, learning to let go and learning to empower others on your team to make decisions.
Yeah.
And then number three, profitability unlocks possibility.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
Can I add one more?
Yeah.
This is the lesson of all lessons. And I want everyone listening to just really dial in on this. After going through this journey and after realizing that work is a ball made out of rubber and my family is this glass ball I can't drop. So I dropped that rubber ball so many times, I've worn the floor thin. And having done that, not just as a PT practice owner, but now as a medical billing owner, and now and the other companies I have, I've come down to this one realization, and it goes back to what you said, Adam, that I matter, my life matters. And it's not that I'm better or worse, but that I am enough, that
you're worthy.
I am worthy, that I am capable. And there are days that I know it. There are days that I hope it's true. And there's even some days I believe it. But no matter what day it is, after all this failure and leaning and learning how to collaborate with great people like you, at the end of the day, my life is important. And that is something I hope everyone listening will start to resonate with, is that at the end of the day, that's the only lesson that matters.
Amen to that, brother. Will, tell us a little more about, I know you got a podcast that you just started. You got In the Black, you've got Healthcare Business Academy. Like, people want to know, how do they find you? How can you help them? Tell us a
I
little bit more
appreciate
about
that. So I am launching a podcast I'm super excited about. We're in February recording this. It will be in April at the latest. It's called the Willpower Podcast. That's my way of introducing powerful people like one Mr. Adam Robin, who's one of my first guests, to the world. They're short podcasts. They're 30 minutes. They're meant to be every week. I'm also going to be doing a dial-in call-in episode where people can call in anonymously and ask me anything. And I'll coach them there on the call, whether it's a 15-minute or 30-minute or even hour. So I think that's the main thing I want people to hear about on this episode, is just that I'm going to that podcast. From there, they can learn about the 4 other companies that I'm associated with. But at the end of the day, that might be a great way just to kind of stay in the ecoverse and start to hear a little bit more about what we're doing to help PT owners. And we're huge supporters, obviously, of you and Nathan. I love what you guys have meant to me personally, and am so grateful for the universe putting both of you guys in my path. I'm so excited to see what you guys are building.
Yes, sir. Thank you, man. Hey, let's do this again in a couple months.
I love it.
Brother, tell Heather I said hi.
Will do.
Peace out, man.
Thank you.